it says. So I turned this is a section from my dissertation that I am now developing into a monograph. And this particular setting, I call it contextuality, and what the hell does it have to do with the environment is something I hope it becomes clear without me hammering it into everyone to let them see it. So, yeah, the slides are changing, right? Can you see my slides changing?
Yes, it's very much.
Okay, fantastic. So I start, you will see, in a broader kind of a theme that you will see some funny things with letters, and some letters are capitalized and so on and so forth. Now I will not go into a lot of unnecessary backstory, but I would hope to engage with you because this series is designed as more of a podcast than a lecture, so I would prefer to facilitate conversations with all of you. Now, this story, as I say, origins, and if you have questions about the capital S, I'm happy to engage later on. I remember this was during, and I was sitting in my bedroom, I think this was Chipara, and I was trying to work on a project that is done by the Electronic Literature Lab at Washington State University, and who was a PhD student then, now is a faculty. Now, Dr. Richard Snyder was working with me, working on recovering an obsolete piece of flash fiction. Right? And what does Conifer do? Conifer is a method which is known to simulate. So, for example, if I have a piece of software that only runs in a desktop or in a computer, the processor of some and the software has not been updated. So, how do we access those things? You can access old books, you can go to the library, but how do we access old software? We are not capable of being handled by our modern systems. And if they have narrative capabilities, then how do we access them? Now, as you can understand, a lot of conversations about the environment and the space that we inhabit, which is why my lecture is subtitled of Spaces and Places, start showing themselves and their applications. So we were going at it, we were using Conifer, and we were working at a old piece of flash fiction, and when we tried interacting with the piece of flash fiction, so the server is in Washington State, mind you, and I am sitting in Uttar, it gave a delay of 30 seconds for a cursor to just move. And I could not even engage in this act of digital preservation and so on and so forth. Right? This was one particular experience of mine, which led me to think about the concept of the spaces and the environment that we inhabit in which digitality occurs as an event. Right? And there is a screenshot of a book that you also see, The Digital Imaginary by Roderick Hoover, which has become to a little late. Let's take this as a nugget of a reference. So School Fieldwork, director of the Center for Digital Narrative at the University of Berkeley, has this very interesting piece that he writes in the year 2006. It's called Wherefore Zone, where he says that in studying electronic literature, a great deal of time and effort is required simply to learn to traverse the text. And by traverse, you can say reading. Now, question becomes, what happens before that? Like if you have questions like what is electronic literature, what is the definition of electronic literature, that is a separate lecture, that is a separate conversation that we can have on having until the sun burns. That's before that. My fundamental question here surrounds the politics of reaching the text. Imagine that you are doing a PhD, and many of you are doing or will be doing at some point of time, nobody cares. You want to access a text which is only available in the special collections in the British Library. That is your primary text. When you don't have access to the text, how the hell are you going to theorize about it? And if you don't theorize about it, external committee member, someone like me, a boring person, will come to you and say, oh, your work is incomplete, it doesn't make any sense because you have not cited primary material. In order to get the primary material, you need to have the capital to go to London and go to King's Cross and whatever, and go to that place and go to the room and access the thing and have the time and money to do all about this book. This book is structured in a very fascinating way. So first, you have people talking about electronic. The authors of the books talking about electronic. Then you have a section where people are talking about that piece. Who are not the makers of the piece? Right? Then there is another section which is called meta commentary, where people are talking about the commentaries about the text. So interviews, commentary, and meta commentary. Now my question is, if we cannot access the text in the first place, all of this interview, commentary, and meta commentary business is not accessible to me because I don't know what the text is. Now, after I engage in a lot of portion about the book, I submit my thesis, and then I get to know Roderick is my external exam, which was a very, very hilarious time. It was since we. So I structure my argument as non-access. That when I wanted to access these texts which the book was talking about, and then people were talking about it, and then people were talking about the people who were talking about it. It's a post-journalist nightmare. Find space. This is how I construct my typology. The first instance is that of Pry. Pry by Danny Canizaro is a touchscreen page where you literally have to pry your way through the screen to understand. First thing I have to do is just call
Sonali, can you mute yourself? What's up? Sonali, can you mute yourself? There's disturbance.
Yeah, no worries. It happens. Thank you so much. So pry is a text where you literally have to pry through the screen to progress with it. You can go and find out more about the text. First things first. It is only available on iOS. So there is a platform solution. If you use Android, more people like you. You cannot use the text. Secondly, it's not available in India. So there is a double blind. Case number one. Case number two, Inanimate Alice by Kate Winslet. Very fascinating text, but it is created using Flash. Flash, as you know, has been discontinued by you, which means a lot of the very important Flash stuff. Many of you would remember playing games about Kaun Banega Crorepati when you games. All of those stuff is gone. If you could just do Flash archiving, have the access to like the portable and the next, which is also like the Professor T. Regard, who works at Washington State. So, platform of substance, geographical restrictions. So, when we theorize space and the environment, when we talk about the digital, is slightly different than how we imagine it in a conventional sense. But, what else can be the case? The second instance was against time. The other text that was referred to in the book was something that was a letter to an unknown soldier. Okay. Now, the problem with this one is twofold. One, this was a heavily funded project by the UK government commemorating 100 years of the Sarajevo assassinations. Even the then Prime Minister participated in this. It was done by what this project does, it asks you to imagine a veteran of the World War and asks you to write letters to him. The letters to an unknown soldier. Thank you for doing it. The problem here is twofold. One, it is basically a collection of PDFs. But if you ask the question, are PDFs electronic literature? Probably people are going to say no. It is not electronic literature. So why is it there? Therefore, does electronic literature only qualify when you have a shiny website and metadata integration and things like that? And then when you hide PDFs behind that construct, it becomes legitimized as infrastructure. So let electronic therefore it becomes fundamentally in and out of existence, as Gitam calls it, the flickering signifier, right? Therefore, if we look at the question of the PDF, if you look at what we can access or what we cannot access, my dear colleague Mark Marino, who works at the University of Southern California, he makes a very powerful statement. He says, it seems as soon as the creative technology becomes normalized, the world is no longer needed. If you just exhibited some PDFs, people will say that this is not literature. But when you have a shiny website, oh, okay, now we don't need to see this. But is it as simple as that? This is what I call the vortex of space and time. So if we are reading a book, if we have a book, where first we have the article, the text, then we have the interviews of the articles, then we have the commentaries on the interviews on the articles, and then we have the meta commentaries on the interviews on the articles. But my problem, as I told you, in very different ways, I cannot access the article and the other things. So it's as if it's a endless spinning whirlpool of signifiers when the text is no longer in script. Therefore of meaning, or however you may want to put it. The object of meaning itself is absent. So what I mean is of space and time. And vis-a-vis contextuality. Right? But is it that simple? Is it that simple? In order to understand that, we have to look at how different texts manifest themselves in different contexts. In India, for example, free-fall future.text, I want you to closely pay attention to it. And tell me, you can just turn on your mic and say anything that suits you fancy. Does it remind you of something? Look into this screenshot, free-fall future.text, and tell me, does it remind you of anything? Into the text, into the background, into how the lettering is done. And just tell me. Anybody? Anybody? If you don't know, then I will. No one wants to take a stab? No problem. This looks like an Excel sheet with all the blocks. And it is an Excel sheet. It is an Excel sheet where an archive and an actual exhibition space is hosted. Now, when we think of collections, we think of displaying digital collections. We think of websites, we think of metadata integration, and we think of 57 other things. But can we imagine an archive in the environment of an Excel sheet? Therefore, it challenges our dominant understandings of what an archive therefore can be. Similarly, if you look at the Indian Electronic Literature Anthology that came out from IIT Indore, if you notice the screenshot, it says read a book. What book are we reading? Yes? Someone has their hand up.
Good evening, sir. Here from this side, Shubhecha here. I'm from West Bengal. Sir, electronic literature means elective English, we can say. It's as mainly, can we tell us elective English, or it can be as electronic literature? This is a difference. Can you tell me the difference between that?
See, I would love to understand what you mean by elective English. So can you hold on to your question and let's meet this question again once I end my discussion.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, no worries. If you look at the screenshot, the Electronic Literature Anthology, what it shows, it says read book. But electronic literature or a digital story can be a website, it can be a filter on an Instagram, it can be someone who's trying to create a non-linear story using something called Twine. If you're interested in what that means, I will come to you. Imagine them as small games that tell stories that you can play on browsers. To to answer the question that I was just asked, I don't think it was clear at all. But it says read book. Book is not electronic literature. It's something completely different. Then why the hell does it say read book? It says that because when the publisher was publishing this, they wanted a familiar understanding. And that familiar understanding comes from a book, and only then it becomes a legitimate infrastructure. Therefore, we take technology for granted in the sense that we do not realize that some technologies are so normalized that they do not remain technologies anymore. They identity inside. The book in itself is a basic technology, the codex, as you think about it, right? These are some examples for the person who just asked me the beautiful question, what is electronic literature? It's a question that we still ask ourselves, right? Just like comparatists will say, what is comparative literature? Digital humanities people will say, what is digital humanities? There are three things that you can see. First one is called Enter Sultana's reality. Right? Yes. You want to say something? Okay, maybe not. But Enter Sultana's reality is created by someone, a multimedia mixed media artist called Shafiq, who goes to Center for Studies in creates gets a bunch of interesting archival access, and then creates this very interesting digital storytelling piece. Just write Enter Sultana's reality on your browsers and you will find this. And as you can understand, this is an inspiration from Sultana's Dream by Begum Rokeya Shekhawat. And it is a commentary on the history of feminist revolution in India through images, through songs, through videos, and God knows what. It's fun. And then there is The Good Citizen by Pankhuri Zahid Dasgupta. This is a platform which is known as Twine, which allows you to create non-linear stories where you can choose the paths that you want to take. Cloak, which you see, blog has been removed. It was the first SMS novel that is there in existence. Right? Good Morning is written as GDMRNG. So many different varieties can come under this picture. This is by my friend Praveen. Praveen is an engineer at Microsoft or somewhere else. He creates something called leaning hype, which is basically an Instagram filter where you move your head and it picks up the gestures, and there is a code that is running in the background which generates lines of poetry. You can go to the Dharti India blog. There is a piece where he actually writes about the code, and you can see the code and you can use it. So, electronic literature can mean so many different things, but once again we come back to Redberg's argument about great deal and time and effort in traversing the text. Once again, how do you get to the texts? Right? So, here is what I did in order to answer this question. I embarked on two-pronged fieldwork during my PhD, and I took two very different institutions. One where I was doing my PhD, and the other where I did my bachelor's, Joint College, and I had very different people, very different crowd, MSc in Digital Humanities and BA in English. And what I did was, I asked them to read these very different pieces of electronic literature, and I asked them to comment on their experiences. And they found out that people in Jodhpur who are doing a master's in Digital Humanities, familiar with WordPad and Chinese web novels, someone does not really like reading because they are master's students, they are more philosophically aware, which is why they can make a lot of commentary. Most of them not just use phones but also their laptops, but their hostels were suffering from their data, so which is why many of them had a lot of problem in accessing these devices. Our experiences of texts are fundamentally determined by the environment in which we read or we understand these texts, right? Now, for example, people from Kolkata found it difficult, weird, and unique because it is not there. The website is there, which also asks us to a question that ephemerality in the digital is a very, very real question, which is ironical thinking about the statement, but it is what it is. When I did the fieldwork in Kolkata, the website was there, but when I was in Jodhpur, the website was gone. But I still decided to do this experiment just for the hell of making a point of digital accessibility. and the asymmetry of access. Reality Sultana's reality had an overwhelmingly positive response. People in Kolkata, people who were doing their bachelor's in English, they were overwhelmed by it. But people from Jodhpur who knew digital humanities, they were in a position to criticize the UI UX, and someone felt the flag was nice. So the cultural capital and the structures of feeling, to borrow from Hans Robert Jauss, what people inherit goes significantly in contributing to their experiences. Coming back to the question of the environment, what surrounds us, which can be the object of texts which respond to the environment. The environment is also very crucially a very important non-negotiable actor which is omnipresent. This text, many of the people had problems because they were also, this text is a little dark, and unfortunately this text is not available anymore. And this text talks about no matter what you do, you end up in jail. Right? And someone said, oh, really? Is that the case? Then what would have happened if Macbeth did not leave down? Now the imagination of non-linearity is also based in the literary canon because that is the inherited training that they get when students do a bachelor's program in English. Right? But the criticism also comes from the fact that it is inducing of trauma, and the reason why people also were triggered when they read this text because I did this experiment right after the RG Corrie incident happened. Once again, structure of feeling. Right? This is where the fun begins. Many of people have problems in understanding the form and content. Many of you who are literary studies are fairly well aware of this entire controversy that exists in literary studies about the discussion between form and content, and how literature often ends up being a discussion of the negotiation of the cultures of forms and contents. Those of you who have read bits and bobs of old literature, especially Moitik Bhattacharya's work and other people's work, know what I am talking about. You do not understand the use of augmented reality. Because only 1% said that it was nothing new. So technological awareness also plays a huge part in understanding how these things work. Just because books are so commonplace that we do not consider them as technology, where you read from one page, one side of the page to another, then you flip the page, then you go someplace, and then you make meaning. That does not mean that is the only way in which narratives can be considered. Even if you think of Christopher Nolan's Odyssey, just because I don't have an IMAX 70mm theater, does it mean that I don't get to experience the film? Or does it mean that I experience the film but the meaning is not there in it? Think of it in terms of access. Even in Jodhpur, people who were doing digital humanities, there was only one fan of haiku who enjoyed gestural mechanics. So, you need to understand haiku, to understand how this works, you need to understand the source code, to understand augmented reality. Only then will you be able to appreciate these difficult literary forms that are inextricably tied to the technological condition that we inherit right now. I will come to your question. Write it down a little. I'm almost there. Okay?
No, sir, I will ask something else. Can I ask?
Yes, please go on.
Sir,
I want you to call me sir. Shamu is fine.
okay. Okay, Shamu, I'm telling you that literature is a very vast subject. So in this electronic literature, we can tell that if we sometimes we speak to ourselves in a closed room, so that time universe or nature sometimes also give response to us. It is possible.
What do you mean universe give response to us?
Sir, sorry, I'm extremely sorry.
Okay.
I'm
No problem.
Okay, sir, if we are not in a closed room, if we are outside, like in a veranda or balcony, and we are speaking to ourselves that what work which will be done after that, so we are talking to ourselves, and if someone is listening to that, not only who is speaking, not only that person, but the outside, there are many things who respond to that? I'm asking.
I am not very sure how, if I am equipped to answer that question, because to be very honest, it sounds to me as a bit of an anthropocene problem in the environmental humanity.
Yes.
I apologize that I am not particularly equipped to answer, because my philosophical engagement, as I laid out to you, does not necessarily consider environment as the object of study. I look at the environment as the place where the event of digitality occurs. Right? So that is a fundamental distinction. Does that clarify my position to you?
Yes. Thank you.
Maybe we come back to it later.
Okay.
So if we come back to this typology about the vortextuality of space and time, therefore we have to add a third very important category, and that category is that of knowledge. And not just knowledge, but also my own bias. That who am I? What is my position? What privileges do I have that lends me capable of interpreting a text that uses emergent pieces of technology which is understood to be difficult or emergent in nature? It has to be digital. The personal is fundamentally the political, even more when we say it's not just the environment but also who we are, what structures of power we inhabit, how much we are, also makes us who we are. Therefore, it is not just about the position of non-access, it is also that about the existence or absence of a very specific form of knowledge or capital. So, then these are unnecessarily theoretical, but I will go with this. This is what I call boundary marking, where I mark my things. I use the term reading, which has been used for familiarity. And when I say text, I do not simply mean letters here, because the etymological construction of the word text is Roman concept of textus, which means to weave things together. That does not necessarily mean printed letters on a page. Right? I use electronic literature and not things like digital storytelling or interactive fiction specifically because I come from literary studies and I position myself as a scholar who's operating to diversify literary studies as a domain. Print-based close reading is not sufficient to understand lit. It requires understanding of body reality, as I have just been pointing out, and cultural difference. Cultural difference means who you are not. People from comparative literature are fairly aware. I do not need to reiterate for you. This study only uses English text in urban context, which is a significant limitation of this work. We need to move from national to transnational, regional, intersectional, and then local. The reception of emergent forms like lit depend a lot on a combined cultural capital of technical and literary privilege and knowledge, as I just demonstrated. Horizon of expectations of students are shaped by cultures and curriculum. Somebody reads a non-linear text and they think of comparing. Right? Alter the act of reading and meaning. Different sides yield different reading strategies, which cannot be reduced to binaries of comparison. My data is about charting depth of experience and not community, which be it in the global south or in the primitive world, which is why I work with very small groups of students. If you have questions, I will take some questions. But there are also certain questions that if you think that they are working, I have also some preemptive answers and I can answer them accordingly if I find these questions. But for now, I will skip them. Before that, I would like to give you some resources. If you're interested in pursuing these emerging disciplinary topics, you can consider looking into the Indian Digital Humanities body, which is known as Digital Humanities Alliance for Research and Teaching Innovations. Our biannual conference is happening this year in KIIT Bhubaneswar. Last time it was in IIT Jodhpur, so you're welcome to send in your expressions of interest. The International Digital Humanities body is called ADHO, Alliance of Digital Humanities Organizations. A lot of the environment that I have been talking can also be seen from the domain of critical infrastructure studies. If you're interested, you can follow it up. And also, video game studies, there is a video game studies community of India, which is called DIGRA, or Digital Games Research Association. Here's a chapter, and there is also digital science and technology studies, and also anthropology and technologies. In terms of leadership and outreach, I'm involved with multifarious groups, people and places. Take a look. If you're interested, reach out. I'm happy to facilitate your conversations. If you're interested in making funny pieces of electronic art or visual things, you can check out the Night Lab resources, the StoryMap.js or the Timeline.js. When I do electronic literature workshops, I teach some of these tools and how you can have fun. Twine is an open source tool and interactive telling stories. Those of you who know JavaScript, HTML, and CSS, you guys can have a lot of fun with it. Do a lot of cool stuff with it. But even if you don't, I believe you can tell some interesting stories where things do not always happen in a straight line. When you go here, then you go there. You have two doors, and you can tell the story about what happens when the character opens both the doors, right? These are some of the engagements that I have done. Academic output, public writing. I have done some digital humanities project work with reference to the Cattle Retails project. Podcasts like this one, of course, and most importantly, curating elements of digital storytelling and exhibition, because I work in a field that is simply not just possible when you do academic research output. It is rather innovative in nature. So join Electronic Literature India. We are doing fun stuff all the time. This is my email. Write to me, and I would like to thank everybody for listening in, and of course, Blood and Humanities Network, Shami specifically, for taking the lead and recommending the lead for facilitating. Thank you so much. This is where I end. You could scan to know more about my work. I've spoken too much. This is where I end.
We will take some questions now. So if anyone has a question, you can raise your hand, unmute yourself and ask the question.
Ortobroto has a question. Should I take it up, shall we?
Yes. Please go ahead.
Okay. What are your views on the idea that certain corporate entities own proprietary forms of media and software? How does this complicate preservation of electronic literature as a part of culture? Can FOSS or community-owned and managed platforms be viable alternatives? That's a very, very important question. Thank you so much, Ortobroto. There is something called the open source movement. I can share more resources with you if you're interested, and my very senior colleague and one of my idols, Nick Montfort from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology at Boston, he is very militant about his politics of open source. So you are welcome to check out all of these things. But yes, corporate entities own proprietary formats of media and software, and it is a huge pain in the man's side, because things go obsolete all the time. If you are a gamer, you know that Sony has come out and said that they are not going to be releasing physical discs of games anymore. So you cannot own any media. That is what the trends are at this moment. Right? And Adobe one fine morning decides to ban Flash, and we don't have any interesting pieces of electronic literature, and we cannot read it. So it is a huge problem. But the funny thing is, digital, even though it seems that it has been here forever, has only been a thing for in mainstream culture for the last 30 to 35 years, especially. Print, on the other hand, has been standardized by years and years and years, and almost half a millennia of engagement. So I think we have to be a little critical of the digital as a platform, extremely critical, while also understanding that it is a much newer form of media, which is probably nowhere near its potential, even if you think that artificial intelligence and everything is reaching its peak as a disruptive potential. But yeah, there are a lot of thoughts to be done, and a lot of open source based challenges to be overcome. Thank you so much for your question. Write to me if you want resources about open source. And I'm sorry if I don't exactly answer your question, but yeah. There is also a book by Kathleen Fitzpatrick, which is called Planned Obsolescence, which will perhaps answer some of your questions. And I'm happy to engage with you more if you feel that necessary. Yes, Nilanjana.
First of all, thank you for this one. I mean, this is a complete news to me. I didn't know about this. So thank you for this one. And my question is, when a person consumes electronic literature, it can be any form, like probably manga, manhwa, or you mentioned Wattpad and all these kind of things. So, for example, if a teenage boy or a teenage girl, he or she is reading something from, he or she is reading a manga or manhwa or something like that, they may not feel that we are reading literature per se. We are having something like it's a form of entertainment for them. So when it is electronic literature, the experience, they do not particularly consume it as an academic experience or literary experience. They consume it as a form of entertainment. So, I mean, does electronic literature shape it this way that, or more specifically, if I can say that, it in a way exceeds the boundary. It let you explore more than the typical canons that we mention in literature. So, I mean, I don't know if it makes sense. So, does electronic literature in a way liberates academic spheres? That's what I think.
First, thank you so much for your question. Now, one suggestion would be to not take academicians very seriously. That is the first thing. Okay, especially the ones who take themselves very seriously. First things first. Second thing is that the entire concept of the canon fundamentally is a colonial construct, and I do not need to tell you more about it. You already know what I mean. Secondly, when you are equating manga to electronic literature, that becomes a problem because it comes under graphic novel. If a manga, someone is reading manga and it is in the online space, and if there is interaction with the manga, for example, you press on something and something happens, and until you don't press, nothing happens, we can perhaps consider that manga electronic literature maybe. Or if there is some background music playing, even if there is no interactivity, if there is multimodality, then we can perhaps consider. But in itself, it can be considered as a graphic. Okay, even a manga is just a manga. We can talk about it in a visual sense. The third thing about entertainment and seriousness goes back to this entire conversation about literature being serious and highbrow, which is beyond knowledge, according to my opinion. Because if you look at Aristophanes, for example, Greek, grammar, comedy, syllabus, core paper, not even an elective paper, right? And then you read Lysistrata, where, or frogs, where it's the crudest form of humor that not even your best friend will come up. You probably think twice before saying something. You read morality plays, oh my god, they're scandalous, but they're still considered serious literature at this point. So it's just about academicians sitting down and taking a cup of coffee and deciding, okay, this is serious. But I digress. The concept of seriousness is just a high culture, low culture debate. I won't add to that because I'm fairly sure you understand what I mean. But yeah, I will not take the seriousness conversation because that has been there everywhere, even when films became a popular form of media. And I am speaking in the office of someone who's a very venerable film studies scholar, so I have to be completely careful. Small Dota is right here. So even films at one point of time were seen as something that is supposed to be spectacular, something that is supposed to be entertainment, not something to be serious. Half the literature departments are running on Disney as only film studies, unfortunately. So it's just a thing of time, is how I will answer. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah. So Juvencha has her hand up.
Sir, last question from my side. Sir, electronic literature is one of the most amazing subjects now I heard from you. Sir, electronic literature can have a comparative study with an environmental or a space something.
Yeah, of course, that is what I was trying to make an argument for.
Seen the slide, that's why I'm asking.
Yeah, yeah. That is what I was trying to make an argument for, right? Someone says that only VR pieces can be called electronic literature because it's old technology. But in Kashmir, internet is banned. So what do you mean? Someone creates a PDF, then that becomes it. So there is a book called No Friend But the Mountains, written by someone called Behruz Muchani. That book was written by him in the prison, and it was smuggled as WhatsApp PDFs, and then it became. So if you look, it looks like a regular print book. But when you look at how the book was made, without the digital technology, that book would not have been possible.
Literature has its digital aspect from the other side also.
Yeah, it can. Without it, it cannot be made. If you say that digital literature cannot be built, then I will also disagree. Someone writes a code that generates 50,000 poems. Whether you consider it literature or not is something completely different. I'm not going into that.
So if you are writing a book and publishing a book, that also has its digital view on it.
I think something that is just digitized and make no difference in its making with the digital platform, or whether when you access it, it resembles features of print in its entirety. That is probably a difficult argument to make if I consider that artifact a piece of electronic literature. But you have read The Wasteland by T.S. Eliot,
Okay.
or any other poem by T.S. Eliot.
Okay, I have read in my class 12. I don't remember that.
That is, I'm very. Please consider my condolences for having read Eliot in grade school. But you know, you will see that the poem has less lines and more references. Right? One line has 5 references which point to certain texts and which means something. It's a very, very important intellectual exercise. There you have footnotes which are as big as the page, verses. Right? Now, if someone makes a website out of Eliot's poems, where you can tap on the screen and the references will pop up, there is a website like that. Then your experience of reading or your method of interaction is fundamentally different of how you read it if you were printed in a medium. So maybe that poem does not become electronic literature, but that entire act of archiving and making Eliot
That is a electronic literature.
into a hypertextual space becomes a project. Shobana, can you write to me? I will find the project and I will send you the link.
So can you suggest any books on this electronic literature?
What type of book? Do you mean the thing that I just talked about?
Yes, sir, that will be very much helpful.
So the thing that I talked about, that is what I'm fighting for. I'm fighting for a monograph. Thankfully, we will see something somewhere, sometime in the future, but that is immaterial. Forget about that. I would suggest if you want to start reading about electronic literature, it's the work of N. Catherine Hayes. She has a book on electronic literature which came out in 2008. So that is a good place to start.
Thank you so much, sir.
No worries. Go on.
Hi, first, thank you so much for the whole value of digital humanities. Although I teach BTech students, so I maybe should not be, because that's where the digital sort of meets what I like, which is humanity. Anyway, my question is, I'm very new to this, so I wanted to ask what, as a scholar of digital humanities, and today we picked up environmental humanities, what role do you think AI plays in all of this? Because it's a very, a hot topic, at least in the whole digital bit. And you also must be aware, a lot of you must be aware that Claude is doing this thing where it's cutting off old books and like scanning them and cutting off their spines to like make new books. It's not exactly relevant to what we discussed today, but as you're a scholar of digital humanities, I would like any or like whatever idea you have of it, and if it's like in any way even related to digital humanities, I hope my question makes sense.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense that it is fundamentally related to digital humanities because 2 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, I was there in South Korea for our EDHO conference, and all I could hear was EEI and flow. And this, I should not say that because all academicians by default are hypocrites to some degree. So I inevitably end up doing something in AI somewhere down the line in the future. So having made that self-referential kind of stupid part, I will also say that artificial intelligence is very much a conversation because the fundamental problem with the humanities as of now is either there are people who think everything will be solved by AI or are people are saying that don't use AI, it will kill you. Now neither position does encompass any good because we are not engaging with the system critically. And in order to understand the system critically, we need to understand where it comes from, how it gets developed, and so on and so forth. One of the earliest chatbots in the world is called Eliza. And it is called Eliza because of Bernard Shaw's play Pygmalion and Eliza debuted as a character. And there is a book that has come out called The World's First Chatbot Eliza from MIT Press, and I just told you about my colleague Mark Marino. He's one of the writers behind it. So my only plea to humanists is to engage with the culture with the necessary criticality that you engage with when you are analyzing a film or a book. Because unless and until we learn to engage with it, historicize with it, we cannot criticize it. Just saying that because it eats up so much water, which is why it should be banned, is not a strong argument to make in an academic sense. It's a humanitarian argument to make. And I make it 24/7, 365. But we have to be historically aware of where the systems of power come from. Right?
Yeah, right. So what you're saying is we cannot avoid the argument solely on the grounds that like water is being wasted, right? We have to engage with it, and we have to.
Well, the example that you just gave brought shedding books, right? This is not new. Do you know Google Books? I'm joking. No, you know Google Books.
I do.
Yeah, you know Google Books was accused of the same thing 20 years ago.
I mean, I wasn't born. I mean, yeah.
I mean, worries, man. All the power to you. Okay.
Yeah.
But there is a documentary called Google Books and the Big Brain or something. It is a mention to a short story done by Nick G. Wells.
Okay.
If you look at the documentary, it's available on YouTube for free. The entire thing is there. And you see the same anxiety that people have today about AI. Oh my God, what will happen to intellectual rights and property and this and that content. And even 20 years later, there has been no advancement in conventional humanities which will be medium technology. It is either euphoria or panic. It does not solve anybody's problems.
Would you have any recommendations on someone who maybe wants to like shed away the cynicism and engage with this in a critical manner?
Yeah. Rupika Rissam, associate professor at Dartmouth College, has recently come out with a book called Data Empire, which I'm waiting to buy. So get your hands on it and see if you can pick it up.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you for the answer.
Thank you. Shubhankar. Yes, hello. Yeah, right.
So, it is a wonderful session. So, I actually knew about electronic literature. So, my question would be, let me asking two questions. Okay. So, a famous poem of Robert Frost, "The Road Not Taken," it said to diverse past, some kind of diverge into yellow woods, and I pick the less traveled by, and it actually makes all the difference, isn't it? So, if at that time, I mean, the Frost, when you actually Robert Frost writing to me, if at that time electronic advancement were so fast writing, such line? Do you think actually electronic literature or digitalization of literature actually uh, killing the human imaginative faculty? And second question would be that do you think really that digital literature may be a kind of threat to the classical literature, or actually literature produced in handwriting text, something like that? As we know, like big tech companies are actually collecting some kind of news actually, running on many kind of media, that they are collecting rare books from the market and scanning them on huge machines and then destroying them. Okay, so actually, uh, is it a kind of threat that we are going to face in near future? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yuvankar, for the lovely questions. First things first is that humanities has always been under threat and it will always continue to be under threat. Without threat, there is no humanities. This is what I feel. Number one. Number two is that you are absolutely right that Frost's emotion are fundamentally extremely powerful, and Frost's lines are what I use when I teach Twine, which is non-linear storytelling. Very Frode's diverse the yellow book. Sorry, I could not travel both particularly making a non-linear story. But the thing is, what is human originality? What is human expression? What is art? This idea has been in flux since people started painting on walls in games. Right? Because if you go back to Phaedrus, where there is a whole argument about why writing is an inferior form of human expression because it exists outside the human body, and why morality is the superior form of human culture. So we can say, okay, morality, writing. Fine, writing, we have books. Then when books began to spread, all the elites were in a state of constant panic. Then okay, now if the books are spreading, then if people get to learn them, does it destroy the sanctity of human knowledge? Okay, morality, writing, books. Then years and years later, when cinema becomes popular, so many people write that this is the death of human culture, and this is this. Cinema, every time there has been a kind of ideological shift, there has been this a response of panic. And when we understand this panic in a historical sense, that this panic has always been there. The question is how we respond to it critically. Right? That even I can write a poem and no one is stopping me to writing on pen and paper. Right? But that does not mean that tomorrow I cannot also create something on a browser or something like that. Graphic novels, even today, are considered to be something that only kids read. It's not serious literature. Somebody asked me a question on serious literature some time back. I don't remember who it was. What is serious literature? These definitions and ideas, they're always in flux. And thank you for bringing it up again. So, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, I think we do not have any more questions. I particularly do not have any questions to you, Shamya, because you are brilliant throughout the lecture. I try to understand the concept, and it's very interesting and very fascinating at the same time. And thankfully, we have recorded the session, and we are really honored to host you. Uh, Charlie, would you like to say anything?
Yeah, thank you so much, for this like brilliant lecture. It was so engaging, and I think the response of the audience is sufficient enough to tell how engaging it was and how people found it very thought-provoking. And of course, it's a very new terrain for me also as well. And there are a lot of terms that people might not be very privy to, so that makes it all the more interesting and so engaging. I think this will open a new path for people to look into digital humanity traverse through different modalities and go beyond the dichotomy between that is always there in literature, that is between the format and the content. And of course, I mean, these are the dichotomies, bifurcations that need to be challenged on a basis of everyday life. Thank you for questioning that. Thank you for bringing that in conversation. It was such a pleasure of Victorian Vanguard to have you with us today. And thank you for accepting our invitation and being here today and giving us your time. I know how busy you have been with your recent projects. And thank you for being here and answering all the questions patiently. And thank you everyone for being an like, amazing audience, asking questions and making the talk all the more interesting.
Thank you so much. It has been a delight for me to have been invited by you in the first place, number one. And number two would be that none of these things should be new to you. You should not be out there because you hear me saying these things every other day. So yeah, we can end on that.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it, and thank you for. I hope to have. Hope we get to the Victorian Vanguard gets to organize lectures and such that are very different from the conventional way we imagine literature to be. And with that, we will take your leave today. We will be meeting you very soon with a new episode of Victorian Vanguard and of course the BB Network of Environmental Humanities, and we'll of course tell you more about our new projects that will be coming with the new season. And thank you everyone for joining. Thank you Shamma again for being here with us today. And thank you Ritom for trying so hard to solve the technical issues as well. And thank you everyone. With this we will take your leave and see you guys next week hopefully.